Assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon all of you, and thank you for having me. And I want to give my shout out to Salim, who's a very humble guy who I had the fortunate to work with him many years while I was new to Canada through the Canadian Council for Refugees. And it's great to see you, Naima, and the work you're doing for the Somali community. I really want to begin to acknowledge the territory that I'm joining you from virtually, and I would like to take the time to acknowledge and show my gratitude and respect to the Lungwanganis people whose traditional territory that I work every day, the Songis, Squamish, and Wasanix people, whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day, and including those of us who came here as refugees, migrants, as settlers, either in this generation or generations past, and those of us who came here involuntarily, and particularly as war, conflict, persecution from our homeland, or the result of the transatlantic slave trade. We make, and I'm sure you share with me this value, that we make such acknowledgement, not some sort of historical footnote or lip service, but as a commitment to a true and lasting reconciliation with indigenous people, and as newcomers who becoming by the day more influential to find out where we fit in this role and how we can play the role of reconciliation. And I want to speak a bit for the public who's watching before I speak about myself. We use terminology a lot, and language really matters. So people might read an article or might see on the newspaper or might hear at the dinner table or at the kitchens the word is asylum seeker, migrant, refugee, immigrant, undocumented, illegal, irregular, all those languages that people use. One, no human being is illegal to begin with. And terminology is very important. And today we are speaking World Refugee Day. Then it is, I'm not sure if other speakers before me and at the earlier event spoke. If not, then I might repeat again. We have to know when we say refugee person, we're talking about legal terms here, and we're not talking about charity, we're not talking about economic stream, we're not talking about people who plan for many years that they're gonna relocate to another place. So refugees in the definition is people who are forced to leave their home. So as one of the speakers was saying, no one chooses to become refugee, or no one chooses to leave their home. So to be a refugee, you must be forced from your home country because of a serious human rights abuses. And you cannot seek protection within your own government or with your own country. And you have to be outside of your home country and have a well-founded fear that you will be persecuted. So that's the concept of when we say someone is refugee. And it's very important to put that into context, because the international community and the whole refugee regime is a moral and also a legal aspect of it, that when people show up at your door, then you have to hear their claim. And this takes us back in after the World War II, when world leaders came together and said never again, and after the Holocaust happened, that if any community is persecuted, then we will protect them. And that is the concept when we speak about refugees. It's not, and I like the Naima, how she began that migration is not something that is started right now. And before even the World War I, there was migration. And the concept of accepting refugees is we have to go back to the 1951 convention, Refugee Convention, which gives that parameter and 69 protocol that countries accept refugees. So the reason why the world leaders came, because they were ashamed of what happened. And within that legal framework, there's a very concept principle, which is called non-refoulement, which means that no one should return back to a place where they face persecution and where they face well-founded fear and where they be killed in terms of persecution. And I think that's is a good concept that we remember. And on that, I want to add, which very particular for Canada, and it's called the Singh decision, and is April 4, 1985. And this happened a year and a half before I was born. And this decision was really crucial in the Canadians' history of refugee protection, because the Singh decision, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom protects the fundamental rights of refugees. The court decided that everyone, including refugee claimants, so that means refugee claimants were not still accepted there in the process, in sentence that everyone has the right to life, liberty, security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof, except in accordance with the principle of fundamental justice. And refugees claimants are therefore entitled to an oral hearing in accordance with the principle of fundamental justice and international law. And that's why today in Canada, if someone crosses the border, they have the right to be heard. Do they have the right to stay? That's another question. It all depends, again, going back to the legal framework of and other international and domestic laws, that if that person has a well-founded fear and other reasons. So I think it's very important to put that context and why refugees end up in other countries. And as Naima and Salim were sharing their personal stories. And today, the majority of refugees worldwide are Muslim. And if you look at where the conflicts are happening, right? And I'm from Somalia, so I'm a Black Muslim and Canadian. As Salim was saying, no one is one thing. We are more than one identity. And it's really important to remember that. Unfortunately, and we see racism, xenophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitic, populist fear-mongering that really manipulates the public opinion. And I'm not only talking about in Canada, I'm talking about worldwide. And then confuse, because the majority of refugees come from Muslim countries, confuse refugees or scapegoat them as terrorist hotspots. We've seen Trump, Muslim ban, and all the language that certain politicians use. Recently, Denmark wants to export refugees to third countries so that their own do their moral and international obligation. So the world is really shifting, as before World War II, the same rhetoric of the anti-Semitic and Holocaust didn't begin in one day. Genocide doesn't start one day. Even Rwanda, the genocide did not start. And it all started in Rwanda by the radio, calling people, cockroaches and using certain language. So, and now we're seeing that and the rise of hate crimes. And I'm really proud and the work and Yusuf, Tariq, and Naima, and the whole team of anti-racism and creating awareness about white supremacy and hate is really important as a community. Create that awareness and also and be persistent, vigilant, and do something and act on it, because history teaches us. And the whole reason why world leaders came together is because of that. And also, just to conclude in the concept that I wanted to put context to it, that although most of the majority refugees could be Muslims, in the Arabic language, which I had fortunate to study a bit when I lived in Egypt, and when you look at the bit of the Islamic values, it is enrooted. Someone was talking about hijrah earlier, but it enrooted in generosity, hospitality, the whole concept of the protecting the human being, preserving dignity, and the whole concept of istijara, the plea for protection, ijara, granting protection, iwa, sheltering, and other variances, the concept of protection, which is the heart and the mandate of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. So even some of the Gulf countries and Islamic countries sometimes forget the tradition of Islamic tradition is actually rooted in the protection of the stranger that comes to your home, and how to protect that. And I think that is a very important, as the world is becoming smaller, and we've seen the vaccination. Countries have a lot of vaccination and countries don't have. So countries start having me, and that's a very dangerous language as well. We could help everyone who is in our home, but also we can help others who are suffering around the world. So how, because of that, because of those history, because of that law, because of that international law, where did my story begin? So as I share a lot of similarity with Naima, when I'm originally from Somalia. I was born in Somalia, any other child, and it's amazing. Naima is a mother of 4 children. Always the parent is the ones that look after their children, right? So I didn't know a lot, and my mother, and shout out to all Somali mothers, they are the hardworking, strongest women I ever known. And of course, I'm being biased, but that is a fact. We can argue another time that Somali women are the strongest. And she put myself and my sister on a boat. So, and think about putting some of you, 2 of you children, because we're 6 at my mother's side, on a boat and not knowing that they're going to be safe, because other boats were being lost at the Indian Ocean, but also people that were going to Yemen as well. So seeing on the radio here in BBC Somali radio that a lot of boats are lost on the ocean, but still trusting God and trusting that they would be safe. And that was my old sister and myself. And when you speak about in conflict area, usually women and children are the highest victim. And when it comes to, and I don't want to go into detail the reasons. So my story began that I didn't know what Refugee Convention is. I didn't know what rights do I have and all that. So I left Somalia. I was very young, and my country unfortunately developed a state of civil war, and because of the Cold War and colonization and other things and dictatorship, so many reasons why So politics was always impacted in my life as any other refugees. So I was child, but I've witnessed, the pain, the violence, the chaos, and but my mother was the one that really protected us, as any other mother anywhere in the world wants safety and a normal childhood for our children. So I end up in a Kenya through, I was the boat people, that's a language that's used. We've seen now a lot of people risking at Europe through Libya and other places. We've seen Vietnamese boats that came to North America. So the history of both people is not, it didn't begin in 1992. It began way before me. And as Bahar was saying, and Canada has been a place where refugees always came, and we have a also dark immigration history. And refugee protection is not immigration because there's a legal framework on that. So I end up in Kenya, but a different refugee camp than Naima. My refugee camp was near Bambasa. It's called Utanga, and it was, everyone was the same, like, because when you run, and regardless which class you were, now you are in this refugee camp, the houses are similar, food ratio that you line up, the washroom you line up, the water you line up. And I remember there wasn't structural education, so I missed my early education, such as kindergarten, grade 1, 2, 3, 4, and I had to catch up school late. So I don't want to go in detail, but unfortunately, the Kenyan government decided to close that camp, and there was the opportunity either to be relocated to Kakuma, which is at the border to, I believe, in Sudan, and Dadaab, which is the border to Somalia, or repatriation, which is actually the best thing. But the unfortunate is if home is safe, right? Repatriation is actually the best durable solution for refugees to return back home and to be safe at home. But sometimes there is no framework or safety net and social net, so people could go back. And the other option was resettlement, which is golden ticket, because less than 1% of the refugees are resettled to elsewhere. So we didn't have that opportunity, or disperse in the country, in Kenya, as either undocumented or urban context, living in metropolitan cities such as Nairobi or Mombasa or other cities. So we chose to go to Ethiopia, and that was a long journey as any other, the whole border crossing. So that's where I end up, caught up my school, and I was undocumented. And because I wasn't registered through either Ethiopian government or the UNHCR, so I didn't have the papers to really have the permit to stay. But somehow I have to apply some other documents and hustle. But I continue my education, and unfortunately, in any other place, there was uprising, students, and in 2001, and that was before 9/11, and that's again when the world changed. Islamophobia, the beginning of Islamophobia, the beginning of returning back Muslim refugees, and the whole confusing refugees with tourists, especially refugees are the victims of terrorism. So I flew to Egypt, and before 9/11, and then I had the opportunity to continue my education, and that's where my work as a human rights began after university, and then worked with migrant refugees, then moved to Canada, and that's where I met Salim. I was part of the Canadian Council Refugees Board and worked several agencies and settlement agencies. stood up for refugees, because thanks to Harper government, they made me more activist. Because the day I arrived, seriously, the day I arrived was the day that Jason Kenney closed all the immigration offices around the country. Because my relative in Winnipeg took me the CIC, now known as IRCC, to change the address for my permanent residence. Then they were like, oh, no, actually, we closed, because now you have to do it online. You have to send everything through mail or do it online, because all the physical offices are closed. Then the whole health cut, in 2012. So thanks to Harper government, they really reactivated me as activist in Canada, and that's how I came to the scene of migrant justice and refugee health card. And I could have went to 9 to 5 my work, but because of Harper government, I after 5 p.m. I was activist, and the daytime I was serving my migrant and refugees and paying my bills. So that's then in 2017, I became citizen, and I entertained the idea of what other tools could I use to serve the public and wider public as well, and say thank you to Canada, but serve. And that's when I decided to run for local government. When I got in, and right away, some of the things we've done is that in Victoria, if any refugee comes for the first year, they have a free transit, so they don't pay for transit the whole year. Our youth, younger 19, they have free transit. We are proud of that. So if a refugee family comes and they have a lot of children, that money could go to rent. Housing is very expensive in any community. The LIFE program, which was low-income families to access the recreational facilities, used to be 52 annually. We made it an unlimited access, because I knew the challenges that 52 is not enough to access recreational annually. So now it's unlimited. At the Business Hub, we helped a lot of Syrian communities to open businesses, business licensing, and helping them navigate. Some of them have now supermarkets, trucks, and other businesses. We are working now, myself and the mayor are co-chairing Welcome City Task Force. And the idea is, strong communities that are connected and actively include people of all backgrounds, right? So the Welcome City, we want to meet our highest civic and economic potential by unleashing the power of its biggest asset, which is our people. So, and our people includes migrants, includes refugees, and all our backgrounds. So I'm so proud that I am involved in that work, doing this strategy. On the recommendation, will go to Council September. And there are a task force, so the CEO of the library, the police, and the settlement agencies, Chinese community, school George J. School, seniors, Songis, Squamish Nation, and other organizations sit. And we've been working hard to develop a Welcome City strategy. And this is like the first city to do such a strategy. And we are using the Welcome in America, which is the umbrella, and Australia and Germany and New Zealand use it. So I'm proud of that. And we have, for the first time, Equity and Inclusion Diversity Office, which would give the staff the right questions to ask: who does the city serve, and who do we leave behind, and how to embed equity in all our policies and procedures. That's a long process, but we are putting the first bricks, which I'm proud. As a council, as a city, we are taking that work. We are reviewing our engagement framework, how we engage with the public. So I'm excited about that. And we are working closely with the Fraser University, They have engagement framework tools. So those are quick things, and I'm learning a lot about procedural government and how to move policies, and it takes time. But yeah, so trying to do with the rest of the council and the city as much as I can, and the mayor. I'm grateful that she's on board, and she's taken leadership, and even when the London incident, terror happened, she called the imam right away, and said, I'm here and able to support whatever you need. And 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 we've been working closely with the board of the masjid in terms of, and even Ramadan, it was nice to let the adhan be outside, and that was interesting. And just to conclude, uh, one thing that today, as we celebrate ourselves as refugees, as we celebrate refugees, one thing we learned from COVID-19 and this whole pandemic is the fear of unknown, the uncertainty that the 18 months or the 1 year and a half, the larger public, the nation have faced. This is something is very familiar with refugees. It's not new, because refugees sometimes leave Rohingyas or anywhere they are, uncertainty in vain for decades, generation and generation, not knowing what comes second, not knowing if life would improve, not knowing what life holds, what their future holds, but they still have hope, and they still have belief, and they know tomorrow gets better. And that is true, because I'm a witness of that, and I'm a testimony of that. Naeem is testimony of that. Salim is testimony of that. And this might be extraordinary stories, but I want to celebrate everyday ordinary refugees who are in Canada that might not have this platform, but add to this country and to their community and host community every single day in their own way, through their families and everything they do. So I celebrate you, every refugee that might not have been with us today. But I know so many names that I could tell you right now that every day is contributing the economic, social fabric, culture, and the well-being for all Canadians. So thank you for having me.